Oh, Blitz. Good morning, everybody. Week 3 edition here with you. Getting ready for another exciting week of action. Tons of potential storylines out there. Top stories, breaking news, players coming back from injury, players still out for injury. A lot to get to today. Right off the top, let's give you some breaking news here. Leonard Fournette of the Jaguars out today. So expect a lot of TJ Yeldon in a very good matchup with the Titans. I think he's going to be very much leaned on with Blake Bortles again this week for the Jags. So I expect big things from Yeldon. No Fournette again. Maybe another big week for Keelan Cole out there. We welcome you back in. It's exciting to be here. Some breaking news as we're kind of going through the inactives and actives that just came out. Marshawn Lynch active today for the Raiders against the Dolphins. Not a great matchup for Lynch. He's looked older the last few weeks. Is this maybe the end for him? Potentially. C.J. Mosley of the Ravens out today. That's actually decent news for some of the Broncos, especially the running backs. Phillip Lindsay, who I would still stay away from. But Mosley out for the Ravens certainly hurts them on the defensive side. And no surprise, Aaron Rodgers in there for the Packers today in a road game at Washington. Expect him to have a typical Aaron Rodgers day, and obviously he'll get rest probably in the offseason unless something terrible bad happens to that knee. So keep an eye on that for the Packers. As we all welcome everybody in here, good morning, everybody. It's really great to have everyone in. Before we get going, week 3 here with some more news and analysis. Quick birthday shout-outs. My little lady Sydney turned 4 yesterday. Happy birthday, Sid. My son today, 6th birthday for Jake. Happy birthday, bud. We have some other family birthdays. Cousin Max, my grandfather, who would have been 100 yesterday. So happy birthday, everyone. We're all looking for the best performances from our teams today. So let's dive right into it. And as always, if you think your fantasy team is going to win, as I check the comments within our Facebook feed here, give us a check mark. If you think your team's going to lose, give me an X. I want to be able to help you guys out there. And obviously, with any lineup questions throughout the morning, drop those into the comment section. We'll answer them in real time and be able to get going on that kind of stuff as well. All right, so let's dive right into it here. Thanks for, again, everyone for joining. So, some top stories here as we go through week 1. We'll do a little opening drive. The return of the Wentz. Carson Wentz back for the Eagles today. They get a good matchup against the Colts. But what I would say is this. If you're going to play him in DFS, I don't know about that. Give it a week. Let's see if he can get healthy. Let's see if he can get to be 100%. I am very curious to see how they let him run around. Obviously, they're not going to put him on the field if he's not 100%. This is a very plus matchup. I think if you invested in him in yearly formats, you're going to play him. The guy does have sensational skills. He can run. He can throw. The concern I have for him in yearly is how is he going to get the ball out to skill position players? No Jay Ajayi today. No Mac Hollins. Alshon Jeffrey is out. And obviously, Mike Wallace is on IR. So his 2 best targets, Nelson Aguilar, Zach Ertz, as you can see here, from a game last season against the Redskins. Those are his 2 best weapons. How's he going to react? How's he going to do? But we'll see how we go from there. Quick question from Ari we'll get to in a second about Drew Brees or Deshaun Watson. I think we're going to have a good debate on that throughout the show. Next opening drive, battle for LA. This is a new one for us, right? Chargers, Rams. I think this has fantasy bonanza written all over it. You got 2 great quarterbacks in Rivers and Goff. You have 2 great running backs in Gordon and Gurley. You got receivers everywhere, Cooper Kupp. You got Robert Woods. You got Brandon Cooks. You got Keenan Allen. To me, I'm very interested to see how the Chargers come out in this one. I think the Rams are going to get theirs because the Chargers defense is suspect. But for me, I am very concerned about Keenan Allen going up against that secondary. I think Rivers is going to get his because they're going to throw the ball over the yard. I think if Gordon could get some touches out of the backfield in terms of receptions, that'll help his point total, as I do think he'll be bottled up on the ground. Again, I think the Rams actually will take this one. Little prediction there. But I do want to see how the Chargers come out. Look, they're 1-1. They got lit up by the Chiefs at home. They then beat the Bills, who look like a JV team. So for me, let's take a look at how that goes later this afternoon. Another big story. How the South was won? Potentially. Drew Brees and the Saints take on the Falcons this week. Very interested to see how this shakes out. You got Michael Thomas, who's been on a record pace in terms of targets. You would think fantasy bonanza potentially here too as well, because you simply have these 2 great quarterbacks and offenses. I'm going to play everybody. You got Devontae Freeman out, so that means Tevin Coleman's in a great spot. Michael Thomas, as we mentioned. You got Alvin Kamara with no Mark Ingram. You got to play him. He's a sensational pick, especially in daily, where you could pay up for him. He's going to do everything, run and catch. I think for the Falcons, one potential name is Calvin Ridley to take an eye on. Then you got the Motown reunion in prime time between the Pats and the Lions with the return of Matt Patricia to face his former team. Very interested to see if Josh Gordon plays tonight. Latest reports have him as a game-time decision. Patriots folks were impressed with his preparation for the game this week. Wouldn't shock me if he plays. I think the biggest impact, if he does play, is going to be when the Patriots line up. How are they going to cover all of those weapons? Hogan, Gronk, the running backs, and especially Gordon. I think it opens up things for Gronk, and I also think it opens things up for Hogan as well. Then you have the contenders or the pretenders. The Dolphins are somehow, some way 2-0 and have the Raiders at home in week 3. Potentially 3-0? Maybe. Are they a contender or a pretender? And then you have the Kansas City Chiefs. Well, I think we all think they're a contender. But Pat Mahomes is on such a record pace. Does it continue again today in what could be a fantasy shootout against the 49ers and Jimmy Garoppolo? So we also have other news and notes here throughout the morning. Breaking news, as we said. But we will jump right in here with some rapid fire Q&A, and we will jump in with Ari and your first question here. Sorry, we're having a little technical difficulty here this morning, but we're going to get that fixed right away. So Ari, for your question was Drew Brees or Deshaun Watson for this week. I'm going to go Drew Brees. The reason being, Deshaun Watson has had problems with that offensive line. I do think that they score points today against the Giants. I love Will Fuller. I love DeAndre Hopkins. But for me, the answer is Brees, and for a few reasons. One, they're going to be forced to throw the ball because of the fact that they don't have Mark Ingram back. They've been most successful throwing the ball. And with the Falcons' injuries on defense, Keanu Neal's out, Jones is out, I think they're going to have that opportunity to spread the ball. I do think Ted Ginn, who's 50-50 to play, will end up playing today. We'll get that news hopefully in a little while to confirm that. I like Traquan Smith, the rookie from Central Florida, who has been impressing Sean Payton. I think he's a weapon out there. Cam Meredith, there were rumors he was actually going to start today and come back, being inactive the first couple weeks. I do like Drew Brees for sure over Deshaun Watson today. I'm not sure that Deshaun Watson's back to being 100% yet. He was a little rusty in that New England game. I expected them to win both those games. Losing to the Titans on the road in that environment with no Marcus Mariota, no Delaney Walker is inexcusable to me. So give me Drew Brees today. G, how do you keep all this info fresh in your brain? I'm a nerd. That plain and simple. I'm just a nerd. I have no life, and other than my kids and my wife, I have no life. So here to answer all those questions for you, and enjoy the day with you. So keep those questions coming, absolutely throughout the day. Little stock up here for this week. We have Matt Breida, who I love as a very solid running back option here for the 49ers. He leads the league in rushing, and he also leads in yards per carry. So I think his stock is going up in what should be a great game today to watch against the Chiefs. I think Breida will have the opportunity out of the backfield. I think he will have the opportunity to catch the ball, get yards down the field, and run. Latavius Murray, with Dalvin Cook out this week, he has a huge opportunity to step up and get you are the owners, some serious fantasy points. I like his red zone potential to score some touchdowns from short yardage, and I certainly think that Murray will benefit from Cook being out, especially if you're in a yearly league and he's somehow on your waiver wire. Run out, pause the stream, you can watch it back in 2 minutes, go to your waiver wire, grab Latavius Murray. I think he's good for 80 yards and a touchdown today. My only concern is if they get up really big in this game and they're more concerned about Cook's long-term injury, maybe they're going to be concerned about Murray and not banging him up too much, so maybe they'll go to their third string back late in the game. Then you got Tevin Coleman. Love this guy. Dual threat, over 100 yards rushing last week. Matt Ryan stole a couple of red zone touchdown opportunities from him last week, so that you have that going for you there. Traquan Smith, just mentioned him. Calvin Ridley, I do think he finds the end zone tonight against the Saints. He's had a great start to the season, especially in week 2 where he caught a touchdown. Then you got two guys that I'm also really high on. Kenny Golladay, this guy's always done his performance so far. 8 catches, I believe, in the opener against the Jets. Scored last week to open the game against the 49ers. I think the Patriots, as we saw last week against the Jaguars, gave up 400 yards through the air. I think Galladay's going to get his today. Then Kenyon Drake, great opportunity to further establish himself as the lead back in Miami. He's certainly someone that we can look at for a breakout performance against the Raiders today. Maybe get in the end zone again and establish himself and push Frank Gore more towards the bench and possibly retirement. G, thank you for that shout out. Since I've been listening, I've been winning in fantasy. Better you than me, my friend. I'm here for you. It's your world, and we're just living in it. But here, let's take a look at Matt Breida a little bit. This was the talented running back from the 49ers, and remember this about him. If Jerick McKinnon doesn't go out in the preseason, Breida's not even stepping foot on the field outside of potential third down opportunities. So for me, Breida is someone to keep an eye on, especially as we move forward this season. Leading the league in rushing, as I mentioned, leading the league in yards per carry. And then, again, explosive fantasy bonanza type shootout. You can see how he hits the hole here last week against the Lions. Great skill. Then you got Galladay. Now, this footage is actually from last year in the game against the Packers, but you could just see how he gets open, how he stretches the field. Stafford likes him, hits him in stride there, breakaway speed. This guy did it all when he was at Northern Illinois in college. So he's another one that I think can really establish himself as a clear-cut wide receiver, too, in all formats this season. Then you also have guys that I'm down on. Deshaun Watson, we kind of mentioned it just before in answering Ari's question. What I'm really most concerned there is the fact that he looks rusty. And the fact is, if you have a rusty quarterback, that's going to be a concern for me and any of your owners. You got Russell Wilson as well, who, again, no weapons. Doug Baldwin, gone, out for a while. I seriously think he's going to be out for 4, 5, 6 weeks, so that could hurt him long term. So for me, he doesn't really have another receiving weapon outside of Tyler Lockett, who's more of a slot guy. So despite Wilson being sensational offensively and having the skills to be a dual threat quarterback, I'd be down on him. David Johnson, I just feel bad for this guy. Suffered that injury last year that kept him out for the rest of the season. This year, he's literally got nobody playing quarterback. Sam Bradford's been terrible. So for me, he's going to be out of my lineups moving forward, especially in DFS. If you have him in your leagues, you're going to play him. Hope that they eventually pick up and insert Josh Rosen into the lineup. And then Corey Davis as well is someone that his stock is down. LaShawn McCoy, very good running back for the Bills. But again, banged up, out today. They have a terrible offense. And with all of his off-the-field issues, who knows? Dalvin Cook. Look, this guy originally said that his injury was going to be a cramp. LaShawn McCoy is out. Chris Ivory will probably start. Marcus Murphy will be his backup. Dalvin Cook is out. He originally had said that he had a cramp injury, and it was nothing major. And then by Wednesday, Thursday, he was ruled out. Latavius Murray is a very capable backup. So for me, I'm going to play Murray, and I'll downgrade Dalvin Cook. Look, this guy was great to start last season, and so far this year, he has not been good at all. He struggled through his first 2 games, and now, obviously, he's got an issue there. And then we have Sterling Shepard, the receiver for the Giants. Very talented receiver out of Oklahoma. He showed signs last season about taking that step in his rookie year. Unfortunately, Eli has no time to throw the ball. They actually just came out and said Eric Flowers, that very maligned offensive lineman that's been a huge first-round bust from their draft class a few years ago, is going to be benched today. So they're going to have a rookie going up against J.J. Watt. I don't think that bodes well for anybody, especially Eli Manning's well-being long-term. So for me, Sterling Shepard's down. Look, if he's on your waiver wire, great, pick him up. Maybe things get better down the road, and you stash him on your bench for when things turn around. But for right now, he's a bench candidate for me. As I mentioned, keep updating the chat room with questions. Happy to answer them for you as we go through the day. And we will certainly update things as we go along. So first, some more inactives, actives that have come out. Leonard Fournette, was mentioned earlier, he's out. I think TJ Yeldon has a pretty decent day. The Titans, not the best defense, although we thought they would be better this season. So for me, that's a huge blow for the Jaguars, but I think they'll still be able to win that game. Devontae Freeman is mentioned officially now inactive. Tevin Coleman, in what could be a fantasy bonanza game, will go in my lineup for sure in DFS this week. I think he's just great out of the backfield. I think the Saints are going to try to key on Julio Jones. So as I mentioned, Ridley and Coleman I think are going to be the huge beneficiaries. I certainly think that with Dalvin Cook out, we mentioned Murray is there. Big news out of Kansas City. Eric Berry again out for the Chiefs. What this means is more for not only Mahomes and his potential, but the 49ers. If you got Jimmy G on your team, you're giddy today. If you got Matt Breida on your team, you're giddy today. If you got Kittle on your team, you're giddy today. Because that Chiefs defense is just as bad as their offense is good. So for me, you get all those 49ers in your lineup. Marquise Goodwin's back. But, again, he's a speed guy and he's got a hamstring problem. Despite the fact that he's active, I would probably keep him inactive in my lineups today, see how he does, bounces back. But for Jimmy G, big news that Eric Berry is out today. Remember, Colts fans and Jack Doyle owners, he's out this week against Philly. That means more Eric Ebron. I'm not really high on Ebron. We know why he was cut from Detroit, drops, and just lack of focus. He is a playable tight end this week, for sure. In 12-team leagues, you certainly can get him in your lineups. But in DFS, I don't know. I think there's safer options out there. For Ebron, I think tight end is one of those positions this week. You pay up for one of the elite guys like Gronk, Kelsey, or Ertz, or potentially Kittle in that great matchup. Corey Clement, big news here out of Philly. Again, I mentioned, with the return of Carson Wentz, no Jay Ajayi, no Darren Sproles, Corey Clement's going to be their bell cow today. In DFS, I think one great strategy is take a look at doing the Clement-Coleman duo, save some money there, or Latavius Murray for that matter, save the money and then pay up at quarterback, wide receiver, tight end. I think Corey Clement's going to be in line for a major workload, as is Coleman, so he's a big one there. Just what the Titans needed with this list of inactives, including right tackle Jack Conklin, Derrick Henry. My goodness, what a bad start to his season. I thought he was ready to take the next step this season with DeMarco Murray being out. But Dion Lewis, he also hasn't gotten off to a good start. This Titans offense is a hot mess, as my kids like to say. And I would stay away from all Titans skill position players outside of maybe Corey Davis here as a wide receiver 3 or a flex play at best. Spencer Ware active for the Chiefs today. I don't think that's going to really impact anyone. I think Kareem Hunt, though, is a little undervalued now. Remember how great he was last year, leading the league in rushing. I think that he's going to have a sensational day today against the 49ers. I think they get him more involved, whether out of the backfield or just running the ball. So that's big. And the one interesting story here from Cincinnati, it's kind of gone overlooked this week. They're off to a 2-0 start, and we'll talk about them later in a little bit more detail. But Joe Mixon out, arthroscopic knee surgery. Someone said this morning that he might be back for week 4 next week. I don't see that happening. They have Gio Bernard here, who is a potential flex play if you have grabbed him off your waiver wire. But I don't like Bernard at all. His average yards per carry is under 4. He's a guy that's had opportunities in the past. Why all of a sudden now is he going to be better? I just don't see it. They have a tough matchup today at Carolina. He's someone I'd stay away from. They do only have 2 active running backs. It's him and Mark Walton, the rookie from Miami. So for me, I'd stay away from Gio Bernard this week. I'm running with the Jags defense. Good choice from G. Yeah. The Jaguars are great defensively. Look, the Patriots put up some late touchdowns against them last week, but they thoroughly dominated that game. Remember in the AFC Championship game last year, they knocked Gronk out. Patriots came back. That would have concerned me. But after seeing them last week, they completely took away the running game. They completely took away Gronk. They took away Hogan until those late 2 touchdown catches. I really think the Jags are primed here for a deep run into the playoffs again. I think the Titans, as I said, and I'm going to use, you like my hot mess comment, I'll give it again. They're a hot mess. I mean, seriously, you're going to have Marcus Mariota who's active, but then you probably will see Gabbert. The only way they scored last week was really through a trick play. Look, I don't trust anyone on that Titans offense, especially Derrick Henry, who looks like he's running around with a weight on his back. So for me, you got to stay away from them this week. I love the Jags defense. They're probably my number 1 or 2 play this week. The Vikings probably go number 1, simply because they get the Bills, and as someone on my DraftKings show earlier this week said, we may as well call them the Buffalo Bulls because they're playing like a college team. So for me, it's Jaguars or Vikings there. We'll do some stock down stuff as well here, some game day starts, and we'll look at some starts here. Corey Clement, as I mentioned, he's someone you got to get in your lineups. He's going to get all the carries for the Eagles today. I think Jay Ajayi should be back next week. But for now, look, Clement was great last week. Scored a touchdown, had about 80 all-purpose yards. He's going to have a great day. That Colts secondary, remember, and that's why Wentz, some people are bullish on Wentz this week. It's because of that Colts defense. Their defense is young, inexperienced, unproven, and not that very good. I think Clement gets a bunch of catches out of the backfield. Remember, he had a huge catch in that Super Bowl game last year. In the back of the end zone on a 3rd down play. I still think it was incomplete, but whatever. My bias there. But again, Clement, very good. Out of the backfield, you start him today. Name further down the list, John Brown. Simply put, John Brown is an electric player. Used to be able to go deep with Carson Palmer. This year, he's found the end zone in back-to-back games with Joe Flacco in the Ravens offense. I think they get a decent matchup today at home against the Broncos. They're going to look to step back into it after that game against the Bengals last week where they got lit up. I think the Broncos going on the road for the first time this season, out of the advantage of Mile High. I think that's a tough game coming cross-country. I like the Ravens at home today, and I think John Brown's one of the major reasons why. And you could really see right here with this catch last week. Look at this catch in the back of the end zone. I mean, truly a solid catch, in coverage, tight coverage, came down with it, got his feet down. I think John Brown has kind of gone unheralded early on this season. He's a guy that was a playmaker in Arizona. He had, obviously an injury, an illness that kind of threw him back there, but he's got the moves. like Jagger, like my son would say. And, he's a very capable target. I also like Will Fuller here, as we kind of showed early on. I think, this play last week just shows off his skill set. This guy was a playmaker at Notre Dame. He's an excellent complement to DeAndre Hopkins. So for me, he's someone I would certainly start. And here's Clement's touchdown last week as well. Getting off the left side here and getting into the end zone against the Bucs in a game that I'm shocked the Eagles actually lost last week. Other starts here this week, I would certainly go with Calvin Ridley, as I mentioned, Kenyon Drake. Those guys are certainly capable of doing big things in their offenses. We will now turn to some bench guys. Deshaun Watson, as I mentioned, Derrick Henry. The last two are interesting to mention, especially because of the start that those guys have gotten off to. Andy Dalton was great last week, 4 touchdown passes in the win against the Ravens. I think he's certainly somebody that is going to have a good year. He's now my backup fantasy quarterback. I just don't like the matchup in Carolina. I think the loss of Mixon actually hurts Dalton the most because now the teams on the opposite end of the ball don't really need to worry about a rushing attack with Bernard. So they could key on Dalton, put pressure on him up the middle, and make him throw. Now look, Tyler Boyd came out last week. Great performance. 6 catches, 90 yards, and a touchdown. He also had 6 targets in their opener against the Colts. So between him and A.J. Green, they got 2 weapons now on the outside. I like Eifert, who's actually healthy, but I just don't like him this week in that environment. And the other name here is Larry Fitzgerald. And look, I love Larry Fitzgerald, if I could say his name correctly. One of my favorite receivers that there are. However, no quarterback, because Sam Bradford's a statue back there. And until they get Josh Rosen with that electric arm back there, I'm not bullish on Fitzgerald, especially he's not 100%. So for me, he's someone you got to stay away from in week 3 as we kind of move on. Gee, what's the latest ET news? Extraterrestrial? Is that where we're going here? Just clarify what you're trying to say in the comments here. ET, I don't know. ET came out, I think, actually before I was even born. So if you got, or Eastern time, I don't know what that is. But if you got more news or thoughts on there, on what ET you're referring to here, I'd be happy to try to answer that for you. Seth Roberts, a healthy scratch for the Raiders, which is interesting. Amari Cooper actually had a pretty decent game last week. Had a bunch of catches. I think today's game, though, is a little challenging against the Dolphins, who are playing really well defensively. I do think that Amari Cooper is startable. Stay away from Derek Carr. Stay away from Jordy Nelson. I'm actually going to play Jared Cook in one of my leagues because, again, I had Delaney Walker, who went out. So, to me, that's a really big problem. Question here. If the Giants lose today, do you think they'll be inclined to tank the season to get the quarterback? Earl Thomas. G. Garcia. I should have known, coming from a Dallas fan. I'll get to you in a second. I'll answer Cardinals' question first. Do I think they'll tank the season? No. Simply because they have too much pride. They're the Giants. I do think they'll lose today, but I think that the team as a whole realizes at this point how bad their offensive line is. Now, the New York media, as we know living here, has been all over Eli, all over the offensive line all week. I think it's a major problem. Eric Flowers now benched. They're going to start a rookie there today. I don't think they're going to go all in for that quarterback and tank, but they naturally may just win 1 or 2 games this year if they can't get a W today. They have some divisional games they'll be able to win, I think, with Washington and maybe Dallas at home. But they really got to fix that offensive line. And I think they're too prideful after what happened last year to tank the season this year. Look for the QB out of Oregon, and that was a terrible beat last night. Some of us that picked the game for Phantom lost out on with Oregon. I think we all picked Oregon across the board. And they had a touchdown lead or a field goal lead late, and that would have covered the spread too. Terrible fumble, but their quarterback, Justin Herbert, might be that number 1 pick. He looked great last night. You have some other options out there at quarterback. I don't know if they're going to need to use that selection at number 1, but also let's take a look at what they're going to do on the offensive line. As much as they want to have a quarterback, they can't, draft a quarterback with no line. They tried to improve that this offseason with Nate Solder, who they stole from the Patriots, but we'll see there. Earl Thomas, getting back to him, G. No news yet. I read earlier this morning, however, he's going to play. What I read also was that he had voluntarily skipped out on some team meetings, so not nice, Earl, not nice, and that they're going to fine him, but he's going to get to start today, supposedly, as long as he shows up to the stadium, I assume, by Pete Carroll in Seattle, and who knows, because it's a home game, they didn't have to travel to a venue to play, so he's technically in Seattle, it's just got to show up at the stadium. I think maybe it's the whole thing where Earl Thomas playing this week against the Cowboys, they didn't want to trade him to the Cowboys before the game. Look, if Seattle loses this game today and goes 0-3, why not trade him? He doesn't want to be there. You get a decent pick for him. The Cowboys will be motivated to do it. They'll be 2-1. Look, I think that this is the type of game where if Seattle wins, they're 1-2 and they think there's hope. They want to keep Earl Thomas. If they lose and they're 0-3 and things are looking done and they're fully going rebuild, why not trade a guy who doesn't want to be there? Much like Le'Veon Bell. I'm shocked at this point that the Steelers at least haven't approached other teams about trading for him. Any one of these teams is willing to give up a first or a second round pick potentially for Bell, maybe a second, not a one, because he may walk in free agency. So what? Go sign him and have him in your locker room. I think teams like the Colts, who have postseason aspirations, would certainly be wise. The Lions, maybe go out there and give a second round pick to the Steelers and see what happens and roll the dice. So this type of situations are always fluid, but as of right now, Earl Thomas is expected to play today, and we'll kind of go from there. Other things to mention here, other guys to bench. Demaryius Thomas, just not high on this guy at all. He's had tons of drops again this season. Not typical of this guy who was a Pro Bowler a few years ago. Case Keenum's going to struggle today on the road in Carolina. I like Emmanuel Sanders, but Thomas is someone, if I could stay away from him, I'm going to stay away from him. Rex Burkhead, the running back from the Pats. Look, James White's going to get his. He's going to get his 5, 6, 7 targets. He's going to get his 5, 6, 7 catches and yards. To me, they're going to want to establish Sony Michel tonight. And as I say that, I'm sure Bill Belichick is listening up in Detroit, and he's going to now establish Burkhead as their back tonight. Look, I like Burkhead as much as the next guy. He's the next Danny Woodhead for the Pats. But to me, he's risky. He didn't get in the game flow last week. I think they want to establish their first-round pick, Sony Michel. So I would steer clear of him. Kelvin Benjamin, I mean, seriously, the Bills' offense looks terrible. Now, granted, Benjamin scored in garbage time last week, but you can't rely on garbage time production every week. Josh Allen's a rookie. He's now going on the road to face the number 1 defense in the league with the Vikings. To me, Benjamin, you got to sit him. I would never play him in DFS. No Shady McCoy this week, so you got to sit Benjamin as well. Derek Carr, look, first 2 weeks, this guy's also another one that we just cannot understand why he's regressed as far as he has. Barely put up any important stats against the Rams in week 1. Couldn't hold off the Broncos in week 2. Now he travels on the road 3,000 miles away to South Beach to face the Dolphins. He's got Amari Cooper. He's got Jared Cook. After that, not much else. Jordy Nelson looks done. Marshawn Lynch looks done. And again, there was a report this morning that came out that John Gruden has basically decided to split the entire organization. People that are with him and people that are with the GM. That can't end well, and that can't start well. So there's obviously turmoil in the locker room, in the front office. So for me, I'm going to stay clear of the Raiders outside of potentially playing Amari Cooper. And then Jack Doyle, the tight end, as we mentioned earlier, from the Colts against the Eagles, he's out today, injured. So for me, I'm going to play Eric Ebron in leagues where I really do need a tight end to fill in for one of the injured guys, Greg Olsen or Delaney Walker. And I also would play him in DFS, potentially, if you could get a good value there. Keep the comments coming in. G, it was a pleasure. Thank you for joining us as always today. Good luck to your Cowboys. I'll give a game pick earlier. Actually, you know my game pick since for FANTOM this week. Keep track of all of them. We did our first week this week. Got everyone together into a room and said, all right, we're going to pick all the games this week. Not all the games, 7 games. I pick all the games. You can see my picks on the site. We did that for college and for pro. G was our special guest correspondent picker this week. We will select someone next week to pick all the games for us. So if you're out there and interested, certainly hit me up. We'd be happy to include you in one of our celebrity guest pick spots. But I think, G, a pleasure always to have you on the show and to comment as well. Checking some other news here as we're about 45 minutes from the 1 o'clock kickoffs. Nothing else really. Curtis Samuel inactive for the Panthers. I think there's opportunity there for a big day for Devin Funchess. I really do. DJ Moore, the rookie, played last week. Had a couple targets, had one 51-yard touchdown. I don't think he's startable, though, even as a sneaky, dark throw play. I just wouldn't go there this week with him. News out of New Orleans, Andres Pete, the left guard, out with an ankle injury. But Teron Armstead and Ted Ginn are active. So, for the Saints against the Falcons, that'll hurt their running game with Pete out this week. However, you got Kamara. He's elusive. He can do things out of the backfield. And that's why, Ari, I did believe big day coming for Drew Brees in Atlanta. Some of these matchups haven't been as fantasy bonanza-ish as we would expect with these offenses in the last few years. But I think with this one, with all the injuries on Atlanta's side and all of the injuries on the Saints side to their offensive line, the suspension of Ingram, I think those skill position guys are going to go off today. And how great is it to watch Mike Thomas play football? This guy catches everything. Tons of catches. I think 30 catches in the first 2 weeks. Amazing. Amazing talent for him. Let's get into some game picks. Sure? Let's do it. So game picks. We're going to throw these up here. We're going to get my face back on the screen here in a second. There we go. Beautiful. I look beautiful, right? Everybody? Am I beautiful? No, we're not beautiful. All right, so I'm actually going to take my camera off right now. Let's start. Cleveland Browns, New York Jets. Browns won on Thursday, so look, we're 1-0. Great start to the week. The Phantom picks, we split down the middle between ourselves and the experts on our team. So 2 of us picked the Browns, 2 of us picked the Jets. So for me, we're going to go with the Browns, and we won. Atlanta and New Orleans. Give me Atlanta -3. I just think there's something wrong in New Orleans. They struggled to beat the Browns and probably shouldn't have won that game. They got blown out at home against the Bucs. Now, granted, the Bucs are 2-0. They just beat the defending champs. I think there's something wrong in New Orleans. I think that I trust Matt Ryan at home. Give me that game by a field goal. I think the momentum for Carson Wentz here is going to be special at home. They're going to welcome him back. The Colts have no secondary. I think he beats them through the air. Give me Carolina -3 against the Bengals. As I mentioned, I don't trust Andy Dalton on the road this week. That's a very, very tough game for him to win. Down Joe Mixon, no running game. I think the Panthers key on Dalton, giving him pressure. I think Christian McCaffrey's going to have a huge day out of the backfield. I think Newton's going to make enough plays to get this game home for the Panthers, and it's only a field goal. Also, as I mentioned, I think the Broncos are in a tough spot, leaving their home stadium for the first time this season. 5 points is not a lot. Yes, the Ravens' defense was terrible against the Bengals in primetime, but again, it was on a short week. They were amped up to play in their home opener last week, the Bengals were. For me, the Ravens are somewhere in between that juggernaut against the Bills in week 1 and the awful team that on defense that we saw last week as well. Some other game picks. Houston -6 against the Giants. Simply put, I do not trust the Giants' offensive line to stand up to Jadeveon Clowney and to J.J. Watt. I think this is a huge problem for them. Houston should score enough points. I don't think with Eli Apple out, the secondary will be able to hold up against Hopkins and Fuller. So give me the Texans. Yes, I know all morning I've been saying that the Raiders are in trouble going to Miami. I just don't trust the Dolphins, and I think the Raiders have been close. Now look, the Rams ended up beating them by 20. That game was a game at halftime. If there's anything left in John Gruden's motivational tank, he's going to get this team up to potentially win this game today. So for me, this is just a dart throw, but give me the Raiders against the Dolphins. I just cannot believe in the Dolphins at this point. The Packers on the road in Washington. Tricky spot here. Now remember something with the Redskins. The Redskins lost their game last week against the Colts after blowing out and looking dominant against the Cardinals. But I think my high school team could beat the Cardinals at this point. So how impressive really was that victory? Not so much. So give me the Packers and Aaron Rodgers' bum knee on the road. This might be the bloodbath of the day. Give me the Vikings -16.5. This could have been 22. I probably would have taken the Vikings. The Bills scored very little against the Ravens in week 1. I think this has all the makings of something very similar. A 33-6 type of a score, 30-9 type of score is where I'm envisioning this game finishing. I love Kirk Cousins here. I think Murray in for Cook gets a couple of solid runs in there, 80 yards, 90 yards, and a touchdown. I think big days for Thielen and Diggs and Rudolph, and I think the Vikings roll in this one to go 2-0-1 on the season. The Chiefs, Fantasy Bonanza extravaganza here with Kansas City and the 49ers. I think Jimmy G is going to have a huge day on the road. I just think the Chiefs have too much. I don't think Jimmy G and that team can keep up. So let's go there. Then we got the last set of games. The Rams, as I mentioned earlier, -7. I think they put their foot down here and try to cover this easily against the Chargers. I think they want to own the city. They're great on both sides of the ball. I think that Goff has a huge game today. I think Gurley has a huge game. The guy to keep track of here is Robert Woods tonight, this afternoon. Late afternoon, I think he's going to get 5 catches, about 80 yards and a touchdown. He's a playmaker who goes so unnoticed. We saw what kind of game he had last year, I believe, against the Giants. I think that's a similar game he has today. Sorry, G, and sorry to all the folks down in Dallas. I'm going to take the Seahawks -1.5. Look, I think both teams are struggling. I think both teams are bad. I don't think both teams will make the playoffs. I don't think either team will make the playoffs. I just like Seattle at home. Their home field advantage should be that 1.5 difference. If this game goes one way or another close, it wouldn't surprise me. I'd love to see, though, one of these teams is going to be in deep trouble because Dallas will be 1-2 after losing to a bad Seattle team most likely, and that would be entertaining next week. And then if Seattle's 0-3, the Pete Carroll discussion is going to start because of how they dismantled that team around Russell Wilson. And now, what's going to happen? Give me the Bears at Arizona. I just don't think that the Bears will lose this game at all on the road in Arizona. I love what they've done defensively. 10 sacks through 2 games, 2 defensive touchdowns through 2 games. They look dominant against the Seahawks. They look pretty damn good against the Packers, and the Cardinals have been terrible. I cannot expect Bradford with very limited weapons to go out there and defeat the Bears even at home. Give me the Pats in what should be a high-scoring game tonight. I do think Detroit will score. I said 38-20 earlier in the week. If it was 38-24 or 41-30, something like that, that wouldn't shock me. I think there will be a bunch of points in this one. And this one is a very interesting game. I've been against Ryan Fitzpatrick, and I apologized to him last week, and I apologized to Mrs. Fitzpatrick last week. But for me, right now, I'm going to certainly take the Fitzmagic-led Bucks to beat the Steelers at home on Monday Night Football. Something's wrong with the Steelers team. They have no Le'Veon Bell. They have no defense. Remember something. They got blown out last week in the first half against the Chiefs and still lost big. They were a home favorite. They should have lost to the Browns in week 1. They got blown out last year in the playoffs against Jacksonville. And even before that, they were struggling to score, to keep points off the board against them last season. Something's wrong. Maybe it's maybe it's Ryan Shazier not being there. So for me, it's the Bucks there as well. So let's get back to some top stories here and some more questions that have come in via text message and things like that. Rashad Jones, the DB for the Dolphins, is out this week. So this actually is going to help, I think, Derek Carr, who I mentioned to bench earlier, so I would still bench him. But Jared Cook, most importantly, because that guy, Jones, would be great on Cook, in the middle of the field. I think Cook now has a pretty decent day, and definitely someone you could start in fantasy. Keep the questions coming through the Facebook channel. Carnut, Allie, Janet, G, Ari, Marshall, all you guys that are watching, definitely keep them coming. One question came in here. Who's your survivor pick this week, and why? Give us a couple of ideas. Well, that's a great question. Everyone does these survivor pools. I would take this week Minnesota. Obviously, I think that's a no-brainer. I actually like Baltimore this week. I think Cincinnati's coming in. I think Denver's coming in at the right time for Baltimore. I don't trust Case Keenum on the road. I also don't trust Thomas. They haven't really established anyone in the backfield as a guaranteed number one back. I think Lindsey's done good things, Philip Lindsey, but I do not see him as their bell cow number one back. So Baltimore's a sneaky play this week. I also think the Pats tonight are a good play. Look, the Lions are, struggling to say the least to start the year. They're 0-2. They got blown out by the Jets at home. The Patriots are better than the Jets. They also, lost on the road last week to San Francisco. I'd go the Pats potentially tonight. Then you have games, other games as well. Jacksonville hosting Tennessee. We just mentioned one of their offensive linemen for Tennessee's out. Who knows how much Mariota's going to play. I don't care that Fournette's out. I think they'll be able to throw the ball all over the yard there for Jacksonville if they need to go that route as well. So that's one to certainly take a look at. Another question that has come in here. Last week you said Pat Mahomes was going to be the number one fantasy quarterback next year. How do you feel about that now? Oh, I feel fantastic. 10 touchdowns, 2 weeks. The guy's got a rifle arm. They play no defense. So all things add up. I think that Mahomes is going to be great this year. He's got some tough matchups coming up. So it'll be very interesting to see how he does against some of those better defenses in the AFC and the NFC for that matter. But I think next year this guy's going to just be taking that next step. Year 3 really, because he had 1 year on the bench. Year 2 as a starter. I think he's going to be electric next year. Question here. On the national level, all the talk has been about Mayfield. What is the New York media saying? I wish if I could say this. What is the New York media saying? I wish I could pull this up and see a little bit more of what your question is here. But basically, if you're talking about Mayfield and what they're saying about New York and the whole thing with Saquon Barkley and potentially drafting the quarterback for the Giants, well, I'll give you my whole Baker Mayfield spiel right now. Next week, he plays the Raiders. If I'm in a yearly league, I'm going to pick him up, sit him on my bench, and see how he does next week. My biggest concern with Mayfield is the weapons he has. Landry's great, no question. He's got a solid running back in Carlos Hyde. What else you got? Antonio Callaway is very raw, the rookie out of Florida. We saw what he did last week in what should have been that game-winning touchdown against the Saints. That didn't happen. This week, he really didn't come out. Then Njoku, another guy, raw, second year from Miami, good playmaker. But can we stop and pump the brakes on Mayfield? Yes, he won the Cleveland Browns' first game since the Eisenhower administration. But for fantasy purposes, he's a better leader on the field than he's going to be for your fantasy team right now. I think in DFS leagues next week when he faces the Raiders, everyone's going to be on him. I'm not going to be on him because his salary might be a little high, and I don't trust the weapons. But for yearly, especially in a keeper league, if you're in one of those, I would pick up Mayfield and see what happens. They're going to develop that defense and continue to grow that defense, which is very good and has taken that next step this year. I think they're going to surround him now with some weapons. I think they wanted to get the whole Josh Gordon situation done with before they inserted him as their starter, get that mess and situation out. What is the New York media saying about the New York Jets debacle? I love you. The word debacle is the greatest word in the English language. The New York media is basically saying that Todd Bowles is on the hot seat, and I'm not going to lie, he deserves to be. If his calling card is defense, which it is, then you've got to get that team off the field, taking dumb penalties in the second half, extending drives in the first half. This guy, if his bread and butter is defense, has to have this team being able to stop literally one solid option on offense with Jarvis Landry on the outside. They got tired at the end of the game. They couldn't get off the field. Bowles' time management and clock management towards the end of the second half there was terrible. You have 3 timeouts. You're on the road. You're inside your own territory. Punt the ball. Trust your defense is going to get the ball back. You knew that Mayfield was going to turn around and hand off to Carlos Hyde 3 times. If that wouldn't have happened, they would have probably ran Hugh Jackson right out of town. So you got to play it that way. So I think, Todd Bowles is on the hot seat. They love Sam Darnold. They don't blame him for the loss this week. I think, Mayfield, though, provided that spark, with the Browns when he came in. So I think that he'll, be fine moving forward. And I think Darnold will be fine moving forward as well. They got a nice performance from Isaiah Crowell first half. But what are you doing taking these penalties? I think the discipline is a major issue for the Jets. And they got to address that going into their game next week. Folks calling for Bowles to be ousted. It was such an awful Jets loss. Yeah, I totally agree. We have in New York 2 teams right now that there were high hopes for. New offensive coordinator, the offensive coordinator for the Vikings, new head coach for the Giants, they're 0-2. The Jets easily, could be 2-1. I mean, seriously, they should be 2-1. They got manhandled, however, by the Dolphins, and in the second half, they got manhandled by the Browns. 2 teams that you're not expecting to have huge win totals this season. And you saw how bad the Lions were last week. The Lions might be 0-3 after this week. So when you look big picture for the Jets, yes, they're going to take that step with Darnold, but he hasn't been the problem, I don't think, through 3 weeks. So, let's take a look at Bowles. I think that's a big problem. They got to address some of those discipline issues and take it from there. Howie, thanks for joining. If you or the fam have any questions for your fantasy team this week, certainly reach out because we are about half hour from kickoff. Very exciting. We have our Week 2 under 6 Cardinals football game later this afternoon. My son Jake on his birthday. They crushed the team last week 32-6. His prediction to me earlier today was 40-0 for the Cardinals. So we'll see. News out of New Orleans, or at least 4 New Orleans Saints. Cam Meredith active this week. I think that the key here is the guy I mentioned earlier, Traquan Smith. Traquan Smith was getting talked up this week by Sean Payton. Who knows if that was a motivational tactic to get Cam Meredith going. But in what could be a fantasy bonanza down in Atlanta, Cam Meredith is a very talented player from the Bears. He missed last season, hurt. He's now back. So to me, Meredith is someone to keep an eye on this week ahead of next week. I'll throw out some other names here, as well as guys that you might want to pick up on your waiver wire. James Washington, the receiver from the Steelers, caught a touchdown last week. Probably starting again this week in their 3 wide receiver sets. He's a name to keep an eye on. I love Calvin Ridley, as we mentioned earlier. I think he scores again this week in a great matchup against the Saints, that are totally banged up in the secondary. Gave up all those points to Ryan Fitzpatrick, and especially you saw that touchdown last week by Antonio Callaway on that long pass. So certainly something to keep an eye on here for the Falcons. And again, if you are thinking your team's going to win this week, shoot up a check mark for us. If not, you think you're going to get the big X, drop an X in there too, and let's get those questions answered. Keep the questions coming in for sure. Let's kind of dive in here as well. We did some game picks. We'll do some bold predictions. How about that? I don't think Pat Mahomes is going to have another 6-touchdown game. I just don't. The second one, I think a team from LA will win today. I know, very bold with the Rams and the Chargers, but for those out there on the West Coast, including Ross, should be a great and entertaining game there between the Chargers and the Rams this afternoon. Another thing, James Winston done in Tampa Bay. I don't think this is that big of a stretch anymore. Look at how Ryan Fitzpatrick's played. Even if they lose tomorrow night on Monday Night Football, are you really going to bench Fitzpatrick next week in Week 4? I don't think so. I think that you really have to see where Fitzpatrick goes. I think Fitzpatrick will continue to play well. I do think that he'll tomorrow put up solid numbers against the Steelers, and I think they're going to win. So if they're 3-0, that buys him at least another 2-3 weeks, I would think, as being one of the only undefeated teams in the league. Another bold prediction, Oakland beats Miami. We touched on that during our game predictions. I don't know why. I just don't have a good sense on Miami. I don't trust Tannehill. I don't trust that they don't have a consistent wide receiver option. I know Devontae Parker is making his debut this week. But again, I like Oakland for some weird reason on the road. And Josh Rosen got to start next week for the Cardinals. There's really no reason not to at this point. They'll likely be 0-3, likely won't have put up that many points. I think it helps Larry Fitzgerald and Christian Kirk, the rookie, and certainly David Johnson. comment from Carnot here. Game was lost on penalties and Darnold not being able to throw the ball more than 10 yards downfield. Well, yes, I do agree with you that the penalties certainly cost them the game, and I certainly think that they need to let Darnold air the ball out. But that's not on Darnold, that's on their coaching. And that's why it comes back to Bowles and the offensive coordinator, Jeremy Bates. If you have this guy who you used your first-round pick on, and you have nowhere to go but up, let the guy throw the ball. Robbie Anderson, who fumbled last week, and again, that was a very costly play, is a great deep threat. You saw that against the Lions. Let the kid air out the ball. He's got Curses, who's a solid possession receiver. He's got a Nunwa, who's obviously gotten a ton of targets and receptions through 3 weeks. Let the guy air the ball out. If they're keying on the run, they're stopping the run in the second half, why not open it up? You have nothing to lose. You're not going to play for a Super Bowl this year. You're probably not going to play for a division title or a wild card. Let it air it out. So keep the questions coming. I think Jack and Marshall, if you have questions out there, certainly let me know. Ari, if you're out there. Also, we're going to send some good wishes along. Hopefully, knock on wood, we'll have some baby news here. Not in my house, but in the Phantom world. We'll announce that later in the week. So the people that are out there that know what I'm saying, keep an eye out. We'll keep us updated on what's going on out there. Other things to mention today. I do, as I said, think that Josh Gordon will play today. I think that he will play. He'll be active. But I do not expect a huge impact from Gordon this week. Reason being, he's probably not deep into the playbook. And as much as the Pats like what they've seen so far in the week leading up to this game, I just don't expect them to put too much on his plate. I expect him to be a distraction, which should open things up for Hogan and White out of the backfield, and of course, Gronk. One interesting tidbit about Josh Gordon in New England. Guess whose locker they put next to his? Brady. Why not? They did the same with Randy Moss a few years ago. We all saw how that turned out. I just think Gordon needs to be out of that toxic environment in Cleveland, and not to say that the environment in the Patriot land right now is roses and daisies, but still I do think that he's going to have a huge opportunity in New England. And one interesting report today that came out was ahead of this Patriots-Lions game is that in April, the Patriots were really, really close to trading Gronk to Detroit. Obviously that Matt Patricia connection, but Gronk actually didn't answer their phone calls in Detroit. Who knows what this trade would have been? Maybe a first, who knows? But that's a really interesting piece of news. But since that discussion, that dialogue about him potentially getting traded to Detroit, him and Belichick sat down, him and the front office sat down, they've had a clearing of the grievances, or airing of the grievances, like a Festivus miracle, and now Gronk's back. And something about Gronk, people say this all the time when he has a down game. Do not expect the Patriots and Gronk to come out tonight and struggle. Over their last 7 games, they've lost by double digits. What's their record the week after? This is not a Jeopardy question. 7-0. I expect Gronk and them to get out back on the winning side tonight. And again, you don't hold Gronk down 2 weeks in a row unless he's banged up. More questions. Let's keep coming in. Another question here. Cam Newton today. Thoughts on him outscoring Ryan or Breeze? I just don't see it. I do think that the Broncos... I don't think I think that the Bengals defense will do enough to help offset Newton. I think that Newton is down a weapon with Greg Olsen. I think McCaffrey's more of a weapon out of the backfield. I don't think they're going to be able to run that well against Cincinnati. And I think Breeze and those guys are going to have a huge afternoon, both those guys down there. So Newton, I'm never a big fan of Newton, especially because of his accuracy issues. So for me, I'm going to bench Newton where I can, especially in DFS, and go with one of those other guys if that's the conundrum you're facing. Another question here. Chargers offense. Who do you play and who do you bench in yearly or DFS? Great question. I think we touched on that earlier in the show. And I gave a preview of this earlier in the week when I gave a Chargers-Rams analysis. For me, if you own Keenan Allen and Melvin Gordon and Phillip Rivers in your yearly league, you're going to play them because I think the opportunity is there to score points, especially in a PPR week for Gordon. However, in DFS, I think you got to stay away. Reason being, there are safer options out there. The Rams' defense is nasty. I think they're going to smother Keenan Allen, and I don't think he's going to have a typical game for himself. I don't think Gordon's going to be able to run the ball that well against that front. And Rivers, again, I think he has the potential to go for 250 and 2-3 scores. But really, is he going to be able to do that against the Rams? The Raiders weren't, and the Cardinals weren't. Now, granted, those two teams have struggled early on in the season, but the Rams are loaded on defense, and I think they're going to be motivated to just stop them at all costs today. Let's see if we can jump right in here. We'll kind of recap here with some top stories as we had the opening drive. Again, Carson, just to rehash here as we get closer and closer, about 25 minutes to kick off. Carson Wentz back for the Eagles today. Fantasy analysis here. I do think in yearly leagues where you invested a high pick on him or capped him, you've got to play him. Here's Aguilar, who I think is going to be a main beneficiary of him coming back. He's only one of 2 main targets I think that you could actually trust this week between him and Ertz. Daily leagues, I actually would stay away from Wentz. Give him a week to regain his footing. I think he's going to be under the microscope here. They're going to put a lot of pressure on him from the Colts, but again, he's in a very good matchup against that Colts secondary, who really struggles against good passing quarterbacks. You then have the battle for Los Angeles we kind of talked about. I think the names to keep an eye on here for bonanza purposes are Gurley, who was electric last week, 3 scores. Goff, I think, is going to have a huge day. We touched on this one a bit. How the South was won, I think Breeze and Michael Thomas here, an electric connection, and I do think they're going to have another huge week against the Falcons, who are banged up on defense. Just as I mentioned earlier, do think that the Falcons are going to be, I think right now they're going to have a huge issue on defense, but I just think the home field advantage, they're going to be solid this week. Then we have the Motown reunion in prime time. What we have seen here is Brady not be able to connect with Gronk last week. First game of the season, early on, touchdown pass. I think you're going to see a lot of that this week against the Lions, who are unable to stop Jimmy G. So for me, give me the Pats and the 7 points. We also have the contender and pretender. I think the Dolphins are one of the more interesting stories of the day, simply because are they really that good? Are they really going to be 3-0? So basically, we have the opportunity there to see if they're going to go 3-0. And for those out there in the audience that are interested, the games all start at 1 o'clock this afternoon, at least on these ones that we've been talking about. So get your lineups in. You got to get there in time. Get your lineups in so you're not missing out. Basically, is what I'm trying to say here. And then we also got the Chiefs. They are a fun team to watch. The 49ers are a great team to watch. I think that they actually have a real shot here to run a few more wins off. I think Conley being in that system as like your wide receiver 3 is a huge opportunity to get a sneaky player in your lineup. You're going to play Kelsey. You're going to play Hunt. You're going to play Watkins. You're going to play Tyreek Hill, Mahomes, obviously. So for me, basically, you're going to play your Chiefs, and you're going to enjoy the ride for sure. As we always do, we go through my DFS lineup to kind of help you guys out as we start the week. This week is actually quite interesting, simply because you have a lot of cheap options at the running back position. But I think I was able to have a nice balance here. So let me give you some thoughts. Jimmy G is my quarterback. I think he's going to put up about 20 points against the Chiefs. They're going to be playing from behind most likely, so he's going to have plenty of opportunity there. That game's at 1 o'clock. Kamara. Look, I'm going to pay up for Kamara this week. I know that there are guys to save on at running back position, but I'm going to find some other values down on the board. Give me Kamara. Again, fantasy bonanza, extravaganza. And then I'm going to pay down. I'm going to get Corey Clement at $5,800 on FanDuel, for instance. I think that he's got that opportunity there to really establish himself as the lead back in Philly. He's probably the most talented all-around back in Philly. I think Jay Ajayi is a great runner, not a great receiver. I think Corey Clement has that opportunity there. Mike Thomas, I'm going to pay up for him. Another one, he might actually come out of the lineup early on. If I have a change of thought here, but I think I'm going to roll with Thomas. Nelson Aguilar, as I mentioned, another Eagle against that bad Colts secondary. I love him. I think he's going to be a target monster this week. So turn those targets into touchdowns and yards for me, please. Will Fuller is a guy that, look, he blew up last week. He was great last year when he was healthy and he had Deshaun Watson. I think Watson and the Texans have a huge opportunity here to blow out the Giants. I don't actually think this game's going to be close. So give me him. George Kittle, another 49er. I think he's a great play today. Obviously lower in the price range than Ertz and Kelsey and Gronk, but I think he's number 4 this week. I'd play him. Latavius Murray, look, the guy is an older running back. He's a plotter, but he's going to get pretty much all the work until potentially the second half when the Vikings put him on ice. So given his price in DFS, I'm going to play him. And then we got the Bears defense against that awful Cardinals offense, which at this point in the season is not good at all. So continue to send in those questions for us. We will go through our game picks one more time towards the end of the show. We are about 20 minutes from kickoff. Happy to answer any of those questions for anyone out there for you. Ross, I know you've asked about specific questions to your team to me over the last few weeks. Please drop those in here if you have additional questions for us this week. Howie, yourself as well. And Marshall, I do think you have a Jack question potentially coming through. I have a text question. Give me 1 second here. This one coming from someone out in the West, not Ross, so thank you. The Cardinals, what should they do and who should we be targeting potentially when Rosen comes into the lineup? Good question. I do think Rosen of the quarterbacks probably has the best arm of all these guys outside of maybe Sam Darnold. I do think he has to wait his opportunity. I read 2 different reports this morning. One said that Bradford's on the hot seat. The other one said they're not going to make a move on him yet. For me, Rosen's got to play soon. I think Larry Fitzgerald's stock would go up. So if you want to try to target Fitzgerald as a wide receiver 3 or a flex wide receiver moving forward, he's someone I'd probably target because I would think and have to hope that within 2-3 weeks, Rosen's going to play. The other guy is Christian Kirk, very talented rookie from Texas A&M. Drafted him with the thought of being complementary to Fitzgerald. So I would take a look at him, see if you could stash him on your bench, and kind of go from there. Another question, Matt Breida question, great one. Why do you believe so much in Breida? And to me, it's not about me believing in Breida, it's just me watching the tape and me being able to see his skill set and what he was able to do in college. When you take these college running backs that play at these small schools, you take their numbers a lot of the time with a grain of salt. But this guy was dominant. He had over 30 touchdowns in college. He had, I think, over 5,000 yards in college. He's really talented. He's durable. And really, who else is going to take carries from him in San Francisco this year? I just don't see it. I think with McKinnon gone, now look, next year's a different story. I think they paid McKinnon a lot of money for a good reason. He's very talented. I think Breida last week caught a few passes from Jimmy G, and I think this week's a great opportunity for him to get involved. I think it's him, Clement, and Murray as guys that you could really save if you want to kind of save your money there in terms of your DFS lineup today. We'll keep the questions coming. We'll go through another set of game picks here. Boom. Cleveland, we won that on Thursday. I think Atlanta, as I mentioned, at home. Something about them just playing at home against the Saints I like, despite Cam Meredith being active. I do think the Eagles, 6.5, is a great pick against the Colts. What's the latest you're hearing on Bell? Any chance he does not play at all? Yeah, I'll kind of jump in real quick there. I think that's a big story, as I mentioned earlier. I do think Le'Veon Bell, there is a shot that he doesn't play this season. Imagine if Antonio Brown's already upset and he's booing off and going off against former PR executives that worked at the Steelers. There's something really, really wrong there in that organization. Tomlin, I don't think has control of the team. I think they've seen solid performances from James Conner. Who knows if one team calls them this week and basically says, "Look, we'll give you a second round pick for Le'Veon Bell, and you guys are 0-2-1 at this point. Your season's going nowhere. You're going to lose them at the end of the season anyway." I don't know why the Steelers wouldn't at least seriously consider it. If the Colts called, maybe not the Patriots per se, but if the Colts or someone like that called, I would seriously take that call and think about it. Maybe if the Redskins win today or the Packers, could you imagine Le'Veon Bell? Let's say the Packers win today and they go to 2-0-1, and they have Aaron Jones, who we'll touch on in a second, coming back, but they really don't have that established back. Can you imagine if the Packers just picked up the phone to call the Steelers and said, "Look, we'll give you a second round pick and Aaron Jones for Le'Veon Bell"? Why not take that pick if you're the Steelers? You're going to lose him. I would definitely look for a circumstance. I expect people to start calling about him soon if they haven't already. Teams like that, maybe Dalvin Cook. Look, if Dalvin Cook's, again, really hurt and you want to take that next step, why not pick up the phone? I don't think Latavius Murray is that long-term answer for Minnesota. They're going to need a better back. Maybe they make the call and go get Le'Veon Bell. But I do think Connor has a big game tomorrow against the Bucs, which makes me think that they're going to start realizing that Connor's a very potential keeper at running back, both for your fantasy team, obviously, but for the Steelers. So for me, Bell sees this. I don't think he'd want to come back to this mess right now. Maybe if they start winning a few games, he'll want to come back, but Antonio Brown's not happy. The defense isn't performing well. They're getting outscored at home. Think about all these games they've lost at home, to the Chiefs this year, to the Jaguars at home last year in the playoffs. I mean, like, something to really consider for Le'Veon Bell. I will go back to some of our game picks here. We have the Eagles. I think they're going to beat the Colts by probably 10. I like the Panthers in the spot a lot. I think that the Bengals are going to bad spot on the road after that huge emotional win against the Ravens. And then the Ravens themselves get Denver at home. I think this is a nice bounce-back opportunity for the Ravens. I think they have an opportunity here to get John Brown involved, to get Crabtree involved. But the key for the Ravens, and watch out for this week, I think it's definitely something to look at, is how Javaris Allen and Alex Collins are starting to split their carries. Well, Kenneth Dixon's out for the season, so these two guys are going to be able to split carries. If it's anything better than 50-50 for one of these guys, one of them is going to be a weapon. But for right now, you got to bench both of them. Collins is probably their workhorse, but then Allen's stolen some goal line touches. He's gotten some receptions. So for me, that's a situation you want to stay away from. You then have the Texans, who I think will blow out the Giants today. Don't trust that Giants offensive line against those guys up front with J.J. Watt and Jadeveon Clowney. I think Fuller and Hopkins each go over 100 yards. I think Lamar Miller has a nice day. We talked about the Packers game down there. I do think what's interesting for the Packers, assuming they don't trade for Le'Veon Bell, which at this point seems unlikely, although I'd like them to potentially do that. is that running back situation. Aaron Jones back. Jamal Williams really hasn't established himself. Ty Montgomery is still there. How is that going to shake out? That's a situation where if you could ever get a hot running back, that's a great spot as a running back too. So keep an eye on that. I think that this Vikings-Buffalo game has the makings of a 38-3 or 40-6 game all over it. I agree that the Vikings here are in a great spot to potentially rest some guys in the second half, and the Chiefs 6.5-point favorites against the 49ers. I think that the 49ers keep it somewhat close, but I do think in the end the Chiefs win this game by double digits. Thank you, Ross, to the good luck for the little Cardinals. I don't think they'll need it today. They are dominant in a force, but we will see. And then we also have the Rams, the Seahawks, the Bears, the Pats, and the Bucks. If anyone has any questions, we're about 15 minutes to kick off here. I've obviously enjoyed another episode here of the all-out blitz. Giving you some of your bold predictions. We'll run through this again. I think Rosen plays next week. Oakland, we've mentioned throughout the show. Jameis being done, I think that happens after Ryan Fitzpatrick goes off again tomorrow against the Steelers. And again, I don't think Mahomes is going to have that huge of a day. Not as many as 6 touchdowns, maybe 4. But again, I think that's really big. Continue to throw your questions at us as we get closer to kickoff. We have about 15 minutes to then. I certainly will provide you some analysis. We could touch on college real quick. One other thing to mention, for those of you still out there, I think that you always have to play with your heart. Last night, I had a situation where I pulled a guy out of my college lineup just because I wanted to see someone play. Went against my gut and my better judgment, and sure enough, my guy that I played got 2 points. The guy that I benched got 19, difference of 17, and I lost by 6. So play your gut, trust your gut. What your original thought was is probably the right thought, so go with that. Any other questions here? We do have one. Let's check it out. Through a text message question. That's great. I love when the text message questions come in. Who do you trust on the Chiefs today and why? Everybody. And I'm guessing this is a Sammy Watkins related question. The reason I say Sammy Watkins should be included is, look, last week he went over 100 yards. He had a bunch of catches. I think in a game where the Chiefs could actually handle someone on defense, meaning the Bills, maybe the Dolphins, the Raiders, someone like that at this point, and the scores aren't going to get to 40-30 or 40-28 or something like that, where it's not going to be a bonanza of possessions, Watkins is a tricky play this year because of how he's going to be used in the offense. But in a game like today where I think the 49ers are capable, especially with Marquise Goodwin back, to score some points, I think there's just going to be too many possessions for the Chiefs to not consider playing Sammy Watkins. And while we're at it, Marquise Goodwin is a name to think about here. He's active today, has a hamstring problem, but he's a speed guy. So what are you going to do there? I would stay away this week. If you have him in a yearly league, you want to play him as a flex play, I don't mind it. He's going to get his receptions. He likes being a target of Garoppolo. Jim Lee likes throwing him the ball. So for me, I would definitely play him there. But in DFS, you got to stay away. Anyone with a hamstring problem, one bad turn, one bad move, and he's out. Running down the notes here, nothing else has really jumped out. Kiku Kuti, the receiver from the Texans, great name. Not a great receiver. He's out today, as is Sammy Coates for the Texans. That to me just screams more of Hopkins and Fuller for the Texans today. Jack Doyle out, as we know. I would definitely play Ebron in those yearly leagues where you need a tight end. Definitely can't hurt. Broncos, big news. Jared Velder, active with a concussion. So big boost to Denver's offensive line there. I still don't like them against Baltimore on the road. Royce Freeman, Devontae Booker, Phillip Lindsay have all kinds of split carries throughout the season. Lindsay's probably been the best back so far. But I would actually steer clear of that situation really until we get more word there. Remember, LaShawn McCoy out today. That has nothing to do with his legal issues. That has more to do with his ribs. I would have normally picked up Chris Ivory and probably played him this week in some format simply because he's a starting running back in the NFL. But to be honest with you, going up against Minnesota, not the type of play I'd like to have. If you're desperate in a DFS league with 10 minutes to play, you want to put someone like Marcus Murphy as your flex, I think that's not a terrible idea. So let's see how that goes today and move forward. Thank you, Steven, for that comment. I hope that it has been helpful to everyone out there that's watching. Aaron Rodgers, active. Brandon Marshall, the linebacker. That's not a 105-year-old wide receiver. He's active. Mariota is active, but who knows there. Paul Richardson's actually an interesting name. He's active for the Redskins today. They really need to get comfortable in this offense and start opening things up. They were okay in that win against the Cardinals. Smith had a couple of short touchdowns. It was more the Adrian Peterson show with the running and the short catches out of the backfield that he broke. But if they want to stretch the field and let Alex Smith actually throw the ball, this is the guy that's going to do it. It's Paul Richardson. He did that in Seattle, and he's got to start doing that here. So we'll see. I think Samaj Pirine is inactive, and so is Michael Floyd, the new signee, the ex-Patriot, the ex-Cardinal. So again, more opportunities here for Paul Richardson to establish himself here with the Redskins and his new team. Baker Mayfield. Here's some breaking news. Breaking news. Baker Mayfield news. To be announced as a starting quarterback on Monday. Real surprise in Cleveland. I mean, you got to play him. I think they actually go on the road or next week for Oakland and beat Oakland. I think that defense is great. They showed that against the Saints last week, holding them down. You know, they're a juggernaut, that Saints offense. I mean, the Bucs didn't, they still won the game. They did. They shut them down last week. They shut the Jets down in the second half. They have that momentum now. I actually think they go next week to Oakland and win that game. So big news, Baker Mayfield will start next week. Devontae Parker active today. I don't trust him in any format. I thought big things of him last year, and that never happened. That never materialized, so I would stay away from him. Joe Mixon potentially for next week. I don't see that happening. You don't come back from arthroscopic knee surgery in 1 week. Sam Bradford potentially staying put. I think one of the big things with 9 minutes left before the kickoffs here, something to look at is Sam Bradford and John Gruden. I think those are two big stories. If the Raiders are fully invested in this mega deal that they gave John Gruden, which they have to be at this point, I expect this front office, especially if they lose today to the Dolphins at 0-3, there's going to be heads rolling in Oakland. I wouldn't expect McKenzie to last. I would expect them to completely change house. They've uprooted a handful of guys. Jordy Nelson can't be happy with what he's done in terms of signing in Oakland. Obviously he thought with Derek Carr, Amari Cooper, and Marshall Lynch they'd have actually a progressive offense there. He's been underwhelming and looks slow. I'm worried that he potentially is done. So we'll see what happens there. We are now 8 minutes until kickoff, about 7 minutes or so. Keep those questions coming. Happy to be here. Next week, we're actually not going to have a live show. We're going to have to do some sort of tape show. So obviously send your questions in ahead of time, and I will answer them. We're going to do a tape show, but I'll be plenty of analysis, plenty of answers for you. We'll get that rocking and rolling. Obviously, start, sit. We'll have a waiver wire video tomorrow. So you guys can get your waiver claims in ahead of the waiver wire deadline, which is probably Tuesday night in your leagues. Obviously, look at the matchups coming forward and go from there. I think this week, and what I'll kind of run down real quick here as we're wrapping up, is some of the top 10 lists in terms of where we rank players this week. We have quarterbacks: Brady, Mahomes, Breeze, Rodgers, Jimmy G, Newton, Cousins, Wentz, Stafford, Fitzpatrick, Watson, Ben, and Goff as a sleeper. I like Goff as a sleeper because I do think they're going to try to stop Gurley on the ground, but they use too many weapons on the outside. The Chargers were exposed against the Chiefs, so for me, that's my list of 12. Running backs: Gurley, Kamara, Hunt. I love Hunt this week. I think he bounces back from not being able to establish himself last week against the Steelers. I think he gets a couple catches today, finds the end zone a couple times. So Gurley, Kamara, Hunt, McCaffrey, great out of the backfield. Barkley, I don't know really about Barkley and how he's going to get his points, but he's going to get his points. He's going to get 5-6 catches. He had 14 last week. That's astounding. Then you got Elliott, Connor, Gordon, who I'm down on this week only because of the matchup against the Rams. Fournette, who I originally had, he's out, so I move everyone up. So give me Coleman, Howard, Breida, and Clement. Maybe actually move Clement up a little bit, but he's the sleeper there for sure for the Eagles. Receiver: Michael Thomas, Julio Jones, Antonio Brown, Hopkins, Hill, OBJ, Hilton, AJ Green, Mike Evans, Thielen, Diggs, and Devontae Adams, with Will Fuller as the sleeper there. I think Will and Hopkins both go over 100 yards. I think that they're going to have a huge afternoon. And one thing I'm going to actually look up right now for those DFS players is where Julio Jones is in terms of ranking with Michael Thomas, because Julio Jones is $300 less than Thomas, so you know what? It's not that big of a deal. I'd still roll with Thomas there. Tight ends. Again, you have your 3 premium tight ends in terms of in terms of Gronk and Kelsey and Ertz. You go Kittle as my number 4. Rudolph, Reed, Burton, who I actually think is going to get further involved in the offense for the Bears. And then you're going to have Jimmy Graham, Ingram. Doyle's out, so maybe slot Ebron up there. O.J. Howard, and the sleeper is Hooper. One name to mention here is Dan Bailey. I should have mentioned him earlier in the show as we're 5 minutes to kick. If he's out there on your waiver wire, he's now the kicker of one of the most prolific offenses in the league with the Vikings. Going to be kicking indoors. Bailey's certainly the second. He actually is the second most accurate kicker in the history of the league. Go out and get him. Add him to your team. Don't use a waiver wire claim on him after he kicks 4 field goals today. If he's still out there on your wire, go grab him. Cut whoever your kicker is, unless it's Gostkowski or someone like that, and insert him into your lineup. It seems that we are tuning down here in terms of our coverage for this week. We'll sign off a little bit early today, but thank you so much for joining the All Out Blitz Week 3. It was a pleasure. As always, hit me up on the Fantasy Forum as we'll answer questions throughout the week. Enjoy Week 3 in the NFL, and we'll see you after kickoff.